I'm going to go over some stocks on the 5-minute time frame and show you the channels we are in for Tuesday. Hi everyone, it's Dow on the Dow. I hope you had a nice long weekend. All of the stocks I'm going to cover have gaps to the downside. And the first stock I'm going to go over is Enph. Thank you to Murat for pointing that out. He says it's a good company and he wants me to take a look at it, and so I am. So Enph ended the week at $128.73, up more than 1.5%. To the north side from where we are takes us to 120.97. Above that, at 3 standard deviations, 130.86. And at 4 standard deviations, roughly 131.74. This is resistance, 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 and take profit areas. Even the bot tells you to get out if you are day trading or perhaps swing trading. But of course, if you're investing, let it ride and don't look at it and micromanage these stocks if you got a good price. Now, to the south side, back at the middle of the trend, 128.22. A gap fills to the south side at 126.80, and negative 2 standard deviations is 126.46. The next level, 125.55, and at negative 4 standard deviations, 124.69. If we hit these levels, I will anticipate a bounce as people buy the dip. And be careful this month. Historically, September is not a good month in the stock market, a lot of red. So protect your capital and make sure you get in, get up, and get out if that's the way you're playing it. Don't linger too long. The RSI is at 55. Now, the 1-year range is the 52-week low is 120.90, and the 52-week high is $339.32. The 1-year price target is 198.34, which represents a 54% increase from where we are. We are nowhere near this level, but I just wanted to show it to you. I marked that out. And previously, it was $288.99, and the stock has been revised downward, but still a lot of opportunity to the upside. Let me try that one more time. There we go. The next stock is Lululemon, my niece's favorite store. She's a gymnast, so she likes to shop there. And we ended the week at 404.19, up 6%. To the north side from where we are takes us to 2 standard deviations, and that is 409.76. 414.37, and 419.09. Back to the middle of the trend takes us to 399.47, and that is support. If we get to this line, I will anticipate a little bit of bounce and then possibly grinding along here before we go to the upside or to the downside. Negative 2 standard deviations is 389.78. A gap forms to the south side at 385.97. 384.72, that gap closes out at 380, and negative 4 standard deviations is 379.67. This is a level of support, support, support. If we hit those areas, I will anticipate a bounce as people buy the dip. The RSI is at 52, the 1-year price target 437.76, an 8% return from where we are. The next one is Intel. I bought some shares for my mom in this stock. Fortunately, she is up. We ended the week at 36.61, up more than 4%. To the north side from where we are is 37.17, 37.57, and 37.96. There's a gap fill at 39.56. To the middle of the trend, 36.32. A gap begins to the south side at 35.72, and negative 2 standard deviations is 35.50. That gap fills to the downside at 35.29, 35.10, and at negative 4 standard deviations, 34.68. I always know that price will stay within -2 standard deviations, and 2 standard deviations. Anytime we hit outside of it is an outlier and is a sell signal if we're up here, and if we're down here, an outlier to the south side, and that is a buy signal. And if you're playing it conservatively, if you're down here, you may want to just ride to the middle of the trend and hop off. And if you're playing a little bit more risky, then you wait to get as close to this level as possible. But of course, you know, if you're reading the candles, checking that out, buy and sell signals there. The RSI helps you with the buy and sell signals. This, I look at this as resistance. If we are up here, I'm going to anticipate a fall back after we hit the overbought zone and then buy back in when we are down here. I like to see that the RSI is around 30, and then if we are down along this line, or that line, the probability of me going and riding the stock up is much higher. So I wait for a couple of things for confirmation. And the key is to be patient. I know that is very difficult. The next stock is FCX. 2 standard deviations is 42.26, 42.75, and 43.23. Middle of the trend, 41.32. The gap begins to the south side at 40.91. 40.34, the gap closes out at 39.99. So if you're patient, maybe wait till we get down here to consider buying in if that's what you're wanting to do. 39.88 and 39.42. The RSI is going down at 39, the 1-year price target. 45.91, a 10% increase. The next one is DVN. To the north side, 53.66. 54.17, 54.70. To the south side, back at the middle of the trend, 52.63. A gap forms to the south side at 51.81. 51.61, that gap closes out at 51.17. 51.09, and at -4 standard deviations, 50.58. The RSI is turning up at 52. The 1-year price target is $60.35, a 14% return from where we are. AMD, I am in this play along with Murat. To the north side, a gap begins at 110.43, basically at 2 standard deviations, closes out at 111.32, 111.43, and 112.38 are the price targets. To the south side, back at the middle of the trend, and support 108.55. If we make it down here, I will anticipate a little bit of a bounce before we make a move to the north side or the south side. A gap begins to the south side at -2 standard deviations and at 106.69 basically, and the gap closes out at 105.80. -3 standard deviations, 105.70, very close, and 104.73. The 1-year price target, 143, which represents a 30% increase. The next one is Oxy. What? Excuse me, 65.22, 65.66, and another level of resistance and take profit area, should we be so lucky to get here, would be 66.12 to the south side, 64.34, -2 standard deviations, and a gap begins also at that area at 63.51, 63.01, 62.82 it closes out, and 62.58. The RSI is turning up. The 1-year price target, 68.42, which represents a 5% increase. VLO. To the north side, 134.38. 135.35, another take profit area. 136.28. To the south side, back at support, if we are up here, would be 132.48. A gap begins to the south side at 132. 130.60 fills out at 130.13. 129.64, 128.67. RSI is turning up at 56. The 1-year price target is 147.77. PSX. I'm going to speed things up and just take this to 2 standard deviations at 118.19. To the south side, 116.91, 115.82, the gap begins, 115.59, negative 3 standard deviations, 114.96, whoops. And did I move that? Let me move that back there. Whoops. 114.33, it closes out. The 1-year price target is 127.85, a 9% return from where we are. COP, 122.14 we ended at, which represents a 2.6% increase. 122.92 at 2 standard deviations, and 123.55. To the middle of the trend, 121.73, 120.53, that gap closes out at 119.99, and 119.29. The 1-year price target, 132.75, an 8% return on your money. The next one is LNG. 2 standard deviations, 168.41, 169.21, and 169.97. 166.84 takes us back to the middle of the trend, and 165.25 at 2 standard deviations basically. At negative 3 standard deviations, 164.58, that gap closes out basically at negative 4 standard deviations, which is 163.75. The 1-year price target, 199.39, which represents a 19% increase from where we are. Of course, you could get it for a better price because oftentimes gaps do fill, whether it's to the north side or the south side, but it could take a while. Now, the next one is Charles Schwab, SCHW, to the north side, 60.95, 61.32, and 61.67. The middle of the trend takes us to 60.25. A gap forms at negative 2 standard deviations, 59.53. 59.22, it closes out, and 59.15, 58.81. I really should move this just to make a touch. RSI is turning down. The 1-year price target, 73.78. The next one is MPC, Marathon Petroleum. To the north side, 147.66, 148.70, and 149.72. The middle of the trend takes us to 145.56. My dad actually likes to wait for 3 bars for a confirmation that it's going to the north side or the south side. So with this, there is a green candle with, a red candle with a green outline. He likes to wait for 3 candles that have the green outlines before he gets in, just to be conservative. Now, the middle of the trend takes us to 145.56, 144.69. The gap to the downside begins. 143.48, 142.97, it closes out. 142.46, 141.47. The RSI is turning up at 44, but obviously it can turn on a dime, as you well know. The 1-year price target, 155.06, which represents a 6% return. And the last one I'm going to go over, because this is getting very long, is XOM, Exxon. We ended the week at 113.52, up 2%. 114.31 takes us to the middle of, takes us to 2 standard deviations. And that is 114.78, roughly 115.25. Back to the middle of the trend. Of course, we're going to hit this number at 113.36. $112.39, a gap forms to the south side at 112.27, 111.96, 111.48, and 111.29. That gap closes to the downside. The RSI is at 48. The 1-year price target, 121.45, which represents a nearly 7% return on your money. All right, that does it for me. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it through all of these stocks. I really appreciate it. Have a great week.